Hello, my name's Mark Tops, the co-founder of The Caring Review. I'm delighted today to be hosting this conversation around a digital employment passport. I'm delighted today to be joined by Jonathan Evans and Carly Rochester. If we first just do some introductions. Jonathan, are you able just to do a quick introduction into who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, of course. As Mark says, my name is Jonathan Evans. I work for a Dutch technology company called Digidentity. We work a lot in the UK. I look after their UK operation and their business development. And as you rightly said in your introduction, we teamed up with Carly, ME Passport, to provide this digital employment app.
And Carly, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, so I'm Carly Rochester and I am a director and co-founder of ME Passport.
Well, welcome both of you. Carly, are you able just to talk us through what is ME Passport?
Yep, so ME Passport is a digital employment passport that is built, owned and shared by the social care workforce. So traditionally, care, we've both worked in care for over a couple of decades. So traditionally what people would do is when they join an organisation, they would come in, do an application form, their references, their right to work, their identity, all of that sort of stuff on paper. And what we've done with ME Passport is we've built all of those checks in an app so that the social care workforce, like I said, can build, own and share that data that's all verified and validated with an employer.
I think it's great because I think a few years ago, like you just said, I think we got rid of those paper-based application forms. And the next step is actually the whole recruitment system to go digital. What are some of those processes for somebody that wants to create their own ME Passport?
Okay, so what the process is, what somebody would do is download the ME Passport app on the App Store or Google Play, and then they'll be taken through a series of checks. So one of those, our gateway into the app, is the digital identity verification. So we have like confidence on they are who they say they are, basically. And we use a driving license or a passport to extract data, to check with Interpol and do the anti-fraud checks with our partners at Digidentity, who carry out all of that background technical stuff. And then basically what happens is they will then be brought, once that identity is confirmed, they will then be brought on a whole journey. So they'll fill out a profile, and within that profile they'll talk about their employment history. That employment history is also verified and validated if they've worked in the UK by linking into the HMRC record. So people can't, just keep out, certain periods of employment, etc. Because what we wanted to do with ME Passport is make it very robust and, sort of deter as well moving around bad characters. So we validate employment history via the HMRC records. We will then get all of their employment gap information. We will then reference check against that employment history. The users will do a right to work check, so they'll do a certified right to work check within their identity process via Digidentity. And then also, if outside of that, if they don't have a British and Irish passport, they'll also do generate a share code, which can be shared out to prospective employers for them to do their check to get their statutory excuse. They'll also undertake an in-person check at the post office. So if, for example, I don't know, you live anywhere in Essex, you just put your postcode in the app and that will tell you what the nearest post offices are for you to do those in-person checks. And once that's done, they would do a DBS check. So there's a whole host of different checks to build out the journey to make them compliant. So what we do also is we've linked up with 50,000 educational institutions. So what we can do is validate people's education history, and that is verified at source and pulled into the passport. If somebody has a professional membership, so with the NMC, the GMC, if they're a social worker, anything like that. We also verify that at source. That is then held within the passport. That's subject to monthly checks as well, so there's ongoing checks within the background. And we literally bring someone through the whole journey of what they would need to present to an employer to get access to employment opportunities. Now, once that journey is done, that's it. There's no redoing every time they go into a job to apply for a new position, etc. They have the power of their data that they own, and they can share it to an employer to get access to employment opportunities.
Thank you very much. And I think it's fantastic that not only have you thought about obviously those frontline care workers, but also you've included the likes of social workers, those that might have a PIN, and actually those background checks there. So Jonathan, what is Digidentity?
Well, Digidentity is we're a technology firm. We do three things really. We do personal identity, so it's proving that marked tops is marked tops to a defined business or regulatory standard. We also do business identity, which is not really a very big thing in the UK, but is quite a big business line for us elsewhere. And we do qualified signing. But for today, I think the interesting thing for the audience is the personal identity bit. So it's all around making sure that firstly, the person is who they say they are to the CQC standard in the home care sort of sector, but also then what you can infer from that identity. So right to work checks, DBS eligibility, those kind of things. Authentication, I don't want to get too technical for this conversation, I'm warned by Carly, but that's something that we might touch on as well as verification, because obviously allowing someone to log in to the ME Passport application and marketplace is very important as well. So it's all that security around the identity, and it's important. I think the important word is actually empowerment. So it's empowerment for the carer, but also the care provider. So it has a lot of benefits, but I'm sure we'll tease out some of those later on in the conversation. Yeah.
You spoke there around verification.
Yeah.
What are some of those processes in the background of your technology, just to reassure care workers actually that their data is safe with yourselves?
Yeah, a good place to start. So one thing I should say, so the way we do things, as I said, with personal identity, I'm calling it personal identity. For a bank, that might be know your customer AML checks, but let's call it personal identity. We do everything to the UK government standards. So there is a trust framework which defines standards and different levels of assurance, and then under those different levels there's different profiles. So for instance, for the work we do for ME Passport, it's at the highest level. There are different routes in which you can take to prove someone's or verify someone to that level, and that draws upon different data sources as you kind of allude to. So typically for a kind of happy path customer, let's call them, and there's not many of those, particularly in the healthcare sector, but it would be someone, so download an app, so it's a digital thing. So you download the app, we have technology on our app where the user creates an account and an authenticator so they can log back in. But the verification bit is usually a passport or a driving license typically. So we can scan that, we call it an optical verification or optical validation of the passport. So we can interrogate the security features of the identity document. If the document is chipped, we can extract the chip information, which is probably the highest level in which you can validate or prove a document is genuine or valid. We then, once we know that the document at least is legitimate and there does exist someone called Jonathan Evans, we need to make sure that Jonathan Evans is the person sitting behind the keyboard or the device. So we get them to take a selfie. We do a liveness check where we get them to move their head in an instructed direction, and that makes sure that the session hasn't been hijacked and some third party hasn't intercepted and is building a synthetic identity. We can then match the selfie to the passport or the ID document or the driving license to make sure that it is the same person. And then all in the background, there's also, we link up with Interpol. We have CIFAS, which is the fraud database in the UK, so we do checks there. And then important, obviously, for DBS eligibility, we do a name and address check, which is an odd nuance for identity geeks out there, which we sort of seem to be obsessed with in the UK. No one else bothers about address when it comes to identity apart from the UK, possibly because we don't have an identity card. But yeah, so that's the sort of happy path, I guess. There are other data sources you can integrate into to score the necessary number of points to get over the line, but that's kind of how it is. And it usually takes a couple of minutes. It's not difficult, right?
Perfect. And you spoke there around those identifiable documents.
Yeah.
Does Digidentity hold anything else in terms of somebody's qualifications, anything else relating to maybe the employment?
Another good question. So Digidentity doesn't, but the ME Passport does, and I'll probably let Carly come in on that point. But the important bit there is once you know that Mark is Mark, to the defined standard, to the defined government standard, you could then say, right, well, Mark has this evidence, this education certificate or this training certificate. You can start to augment that identity with other attributes, which is obviously really key when you're applying for a job, because not only do you now know that Mark has the right to work in the UK, has passed his DBS and criminal record checks, but he also has these different evidences and these different educational certificates that might make him eligible to certain roles. And by the way, this use case is amazing for the care sector, but ME Passport's been built in a way that it could go into travel or tourism or retail or other places as well, because these things they're not just around health and social care, they kind of crop up all over the place, right?
And I think in the UK, digital identity is something that's fairly new. It's not being spoken about a lot. What are the benefits to organisations that are using it?
Oh, good question. So there's myriad benefits. I think that compliance is one. We were talking actually in the green room downstairs about the different way care providers. Some do it really well, their compliance obligations. Some do it really badly. So this standardises the whole process and it objectifies the whole process, right? So if you're working at a care provider, and I'm sure Carly's got some good anecdotes attesting to this, you might have a team of people that are very good and are well trained and have experience in saying, like, that passport definitely looks like Mark, and yes, these security features do suggest that it is the right passport. Others aren't trained and they don't know, and they haven't got the incentives to do the checks properly. And if you're in front of someone that wants a job and they're quite imposing and you're the new intern, are you really going to say to them that, oh no, this passport doesn't match to the guidelines? You're probably going to let them go through. You can see that happening. So it really, really raises the bar on security. It raises the bar on compliance. It reduces fraud. But importantly, and I think that, getting down to the brass tacks, it reduces a lot of time and effort and money. And that's the real amazing benefit. It streamlines the whole process and it strips out a lot of the cost in the whole process.
Thank you very much. Just in terms of going back a step, in terms of, so somebody's uploaded their documentation, what are those checks in the background that happen? So I'm not technical, so there's obviously multi-factor authentication. Are you able just to elaborate on kind of what happens there at the back end?
Yeah, so I've kind of mentioned it. So you've got the document validation, but then you've also got the anti-fraud checks that go on. So it's a CIFAS database that we tap into. It's the Interpol lost and stolen database as well. But you mentioned multi-factor authentication, and that's interesting because that is absolutely part of the whole process and of the whole kind of toolkit that ME Passport is. But that's not about the verification. So the multi-factor authentication bit is, now we know Mark's Mark, we need to know that it's still Mark when he logs back in, right? So what ME Passport does, that it creates a smart card, we call it. It's an authentication mechanism, which is basically using your mobile phone, as I call it, the remote control. And the good thing about that is it's something you have, something you are, and something you know. So you have your mobile phone, so that belongs to you. Something you are, because you're authenticating your mobile phone to open up the ME Passport app, so you're using either a biometric fingerprint or a facial biometric, and it's something you know. So we get the user to create a 5-digit PIN that they have to memorize on creating the passport. So that creates, I'm going to get geeky a bit now, but that's in accordance to European standard it's called the IDAS standard for authentication and verification, and that's to the very, very highest standard. So you've got a really secure, Carly calls it the passport, but you've got a really secure credential to ensure that someone hasn't hijacked, for want of a better word, the identity and is using it for criminal purposes. So that's important. So there's the authentication piece, logging in, and then there's the verification piece, which is making sure that the person is who they say they are. So they're two separate things, but they are important, strong together.
No, thank you very much. And I'd imagine that actually having all of that in one place is obviously really beneficial, not only for the person that's using it, that's looking for a job, but also for the organisation to know that there's one single source of truth.
Yeah.
Because like you said earlier, actually, if you have got somebody that might have a passport or a driving licence from overseas, actually, unless you're trained and upskilled in that, you might not necessarily know.
Of course, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. So, American driving licenses, it's a state thing, right? So they're all different. So they've all got different security features and different things to interrogate. You can't possibly be trained to identify, every single security feature on every single document. And fraudsters are getting much better. So the quality of these documents are really, really good. Even trained border force agents have a much higher margin for error than the technology. So I go back to the point, technology is much, much stronger and it's much, much more objective in that initial verification, which is powerful. But you've highlighted another important thing, and I'll use the word empowerment. What we're doing with ME Passport is we're putting the power back in the hands of the user, and in this case, the carer. So at any moment in time, the carer can revoke access, they can delete their ME Passport. They're in control of their own data, which is a completely transformational thing. At the moment, that people's data is everywhere. This brings it back to them in one simple, easy to use app that connects them to their potential employers, and they have total control over it. And that's really the transformational element of the whole thing.
No, absolutely. And then obviously complies with GDPR here and obviously in the UK.
Absolutely, that's a good important point, because it's an important point for the care providers, all of that as well, right? So it solves that problem.
I want to talk about our health colleagues. Obviously, we said earlier that this is very new to social care, very exciting for social care. What's happening over in the NHS with regards to one single source and digital identification?
Yeah, that's really relevant, because we actually, well, you know this because you've done your research, we worked with NHS England on something quite similar. So they are using Digidentity in exactly the same way or a very similar way to ME Passport for right to work and DBS eligibility. They're using a slightly different technology, still has the same adherence to the same trust framework standards as ME Passport, but it effectively, well, they call it a digital staff passport. So if you're a doctor that's just graduated, maybe you've got a placement in Southampton, in 6 months' time, your placement might be in Newcastle. At the moment, the way it works, and this is crazy, but it won't surprise you because you work in the health sector, so you're not surprised by anything. You have to take a day off work, you have to get all of your documents together, printouts of utility bills, and get your passport out the filing cabinet upstairs in the upstairs bedroom, get a train at your own cost back up to Newcastle, having booked a session with the HR manager there to present all the documents for that HR manager to do the verification on you in a face-to-face manner. And this is 2024. So what this does is it transforms that whole process and it digitizes the whole process, right? So much in the same way as ME Passport, you do it all on an app. You can scan a QR code on a website, and you can transfer using explicit consent to transfer that data to the relying party, in this case, an NHS trust in Newcastle, a hospital in Newcastle, to meet all those compliance checks. So that's what we do for NHS. We also work with the General Medical Council. So for every doctor with a licence to practice in the UK now has to go through an identity check, and we do the digital identity for those. And we've been working with them for the best part of 2 years now, and we've verified tens of thousands of doctors in over 150 countries. So it's working on that level as well. So it's quite powerful, and it's good that the health sector is actually adopting these sort of digital technologies, because it's really having an empowering effect, but it's also cutting out cost, which is a big problem, right?
Cost and time. And listening to you there talking, actually, the amount of time that's saved from either that HR representative, the person that doesn't then have to travel, saving money because actually they've not got to pay to travel to wherever they need to go. So yeah, all round benefits.
Absolutely right, yeah.
Have you got any personal stories that you've seen, obviously you've probably got thousands, of where digital identification has benefited either a person or an organisation and kind of accelerated the process forward?
Yeah, I mean, Carly will have a lot better ones than me, being sort of involved in the social care sector, but I'll give you one, for example. I mentioned we work with government, so Digidentity was one of the founder members of Gov.uk Verify, which was, without going into the history of identity in the UK, that was the government identity scheme for the best part of 10 years. adopting similar kind of portable principles of reusing verified information. And we worked in COVID, we worked a lot with DWP for a universal credit. So all the job centres obviously went off, closed because it was COVID and no one was going to work, right? So if you wanted to verify yourself for universal credit, you had to go down the digital route, and we were the de facto digital route. So so we had to ramp up scale our systems literally overnight, and we were onboarding over 100,000 at peak, over 100,000 users a day, and that was really good to be a part of, because you remember during COVID, these were vulnerable people that needed access to money, and their only way of accessing it was proving their identity using technology. So for us to be a part of making sure that system didn't break was brilliant. And then, I'll leave it to Carly for some really sort of tangible, sort of personal experiences, which I know she has a lot of, to augment that answer. But yeah, no, it's transformational, which is one of the reasons why I love the health and social care use case, because it's not just making it easier for someone to open up a bank account and stripping out and making that process more efficient. It's actually, there's that human element. It's actually, to taking it to its real extreme, it's saving lives. It's certainly improving people's lives.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And Carly, are you able to give us a personal story that has positively impacted either a care worker or a care organisation?
Yeah, sure. There's quite a few, since we obviously launched ME Passport in April, so it's fairly new, but we've come across all different sort of stories that we probably didn't even think of as well, such as we've done a lot of job fairs recently, and some of the feedback has been, I really wanted to work in care, but the forms just scared me. And I've cared for people like lots of times within my family and my life, etc. But going into all different organisations and having to fill in all that paperwork has caused me great anxiety. The fact that now I've just done that once and I've got that data now, I can work in social care and do the career that I have passion for, has been some of the feedback. And people that have given me that feedback have gone on to go and get jobs in social care, because we've worked with companies like Maximus or Care Providers Voice, etc., who have supported them through the app, and they've been able to then go out into the community and get jobs. The other is, like I said, having that passport and having visibility to local providers and local job opportunities. We had a lady recently and she was made redundant, and she come to us and she was like, I'm desperate, like I can't play around, like I really need a job. And I keep going to places. She'd gone down to a local provider, she'd done training, she'd done all of the compliance, they never offered her any work. And all of that data just sat within that organisation. It was valuable to nobody. So what happened was she joined ME Passport, we told her all about it, and then she come through the process and she was able to connect with Open to Work and let providers know that she was available. And within 4 days, she went on to get a job with a company called Team Motivate. They won't mind me mentioning them because they'll be talking, I'm sure, later today. But she went on to get a manager's job with Team Motivate, and now she heads up a team in a supported living environment. And she actually is supporting their staff and new staff to get onto ME Passport. So yeah, 4 days in. And I mean, she's amazing, but it just goes to show, she's come to us and she's like, I've done training, I've done all of my compliance, and I was just never given any work, and I'm available, and I'm so upset that all of that cost, time and effort's gone to absolutely nothing. And I think we, if we're real about it, we hear them stories all the time.
Absolutely. And I think what a fantastic story for social care, actually, that somebody, okay, it was a sad situation with the redundancy, but has come into our sector, is now leading her own team, actually bringing skills in from another industry that's positively benefiting her team and that organisation, and ultimately the people that they support.
Yeah, definitely.
Just want to look at some of the value for organisations. What are some of the benefits for social care providers from using this?
Well, the last 14 years of my sort of social care career has been as a registered manager, and that's where ME Passport was born, feeling the pressure of needing to have extra carers in the community, because we've always got that increasing demand of people needing care, or needing extra care because sadly they've experienced deterioration, etc. And what led to ME Passport, and I've told this story now a number of times, but it's just the absolute sitting in the chair thinking, do you know what, my job title sometimes should be magician, because how I've got people that are desperate for the extra care because they're in the worst situations, and then I've got carers that could have car problems, that could have childcare problems, that are sick themselves, or whatever else it is, or they've had to change their availability. And then I've got people coming through the door in the recruitment hamster wheel, where it's taken up to 16 weeks to clear. So all of those things led us as a provider to say, something's got to change, it's got to be different. So the value to me as a provider right then, when sort of ME Passport was born, would have been that I had access to a workforce that were ready to work, basically. That was something that we never ever had before. We couldn't see where the capacity in the market was. People want to work, they're desperate to work. We often come up against people and they're chasing their checks 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks in, and they talk to you with complete desperation because not everyone has recourse to public funds, and the money's got to come from somewhere, right? So it's like, the value to us as a care provider obviously is what I've said, and the value to the workforce is, that they have access to employment opportunities quicker.
Thank you very much. And you're absolutely right there about a registered manager wearing multiple hats, and I remember it all too well. You are really a jack of all trades. Jonathan spoke a minute ago about obviously those time-saving factors from an administrative point of view. What's that been like for yourselves, and what's been the benefit to your team of using ME Passport?
Yeah, so like I said, the actual traditional application process could take up to 16 weeks. It dependent on a multitude of things, how long the DBS comes back, etc., etc., references, etc. And with ME Passport, what happens is we have a dashboard. People within the area that we are recruiting have the ability within their app to let the market know that they're open to work. And then what I can do now is see them. So if I approach somebody on the ME Passport platform, they are fully cleared. So all of those checks have been done. What that means in terms of time, after I've interviewed them and they're a right fit for our organisation, instead of 16 weeks, I have access to their full data in 1 second with their consent. So, people say to me, well, what's the time saving? And I'm like, right, okay, well, what's the longest you've ever onboarded someone? And they're like, well, how long's a piece of string? We've all got these stories. I'm sure you've got many, where it's took months. And people just disengage as well, because if I need work right now, I need work right now. I don't need work in 4 months. I don't need work in 2 months because I've still got mouths to feed and a roof to keep. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, but yeah, so the time difference is 16 weeks. And if I own my data and I choose to share it, it's a second to a provider.
So really streamlines
Yes.
and quickens that process. You spoke about Regulation 19 with the CQC. How does ME Passport help meet compliance for care providers?
So the whole, the fundamental underpinning of the whole design of the platform has been built to meet Regulation 19. And I think that, being care providers and, doing 2-week audits once a quarter with 150 paper files has given me the trauma to know that, what we're looking for with the support of outside advisors that have looked at it, etc. as well. But, just the fact that we have the verified identity and we've got evidence of how we've obtained identity, how identity has been obtained, the date, the time, what the document has been used, the checks that have gone behind it with Interpol and anti-fraud checks, the employment data, how that's been captured. Like I was saying earlier, if somebody's had work within the UK, the HMRC record, the verification of that, the explanation of gaps. So the system is built that if you've got an employment gap, you are prompted to give a solid reason as to why, whatever you was doing. So we have that to meet the CQC Regulation 19. The references, references are a bit of a bugbear for us all because people just give dates only. Our system won't just accept dates only. We actually have a statement within the platform that says, okay, it may be your company policy to provide dates only, but we have a duty of care to each other. So we ask them to sign a disclaimer to say that there is no open safeguardings or complaints against that person. And then obviously the level of DBS check, all of that data is held on the platform to satisfy CQC that the level of check is correct for the workforce position that they're in. And then it's not a requirement, but to be portable, obviously we've added the DBS update service. So every single bit of data that you need to meet Regulation 19 to present to someone to say, this is Carly Rochester, here she is, here's her passport, providers can run a report and it meets CQC Regulation 19. I mean, CQC actually just recently was like, wow. And I'm like, endorse it. Come on.
And absolutely, because we know from looking at CQC reports, actually that regulation is one that is regularly breached.
Yeah.
So actually that's a benefit in itself for care providers, that actually you're using a system that you know that is being built to that regulation, that's going to aid all of you in compliance.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and it's a bit of a funny one, isn't it? Because CQC don't actually endorse any product, which is fair enough. But I've even said, come in and do an inspection, But yeah, it's providers, even looking at the regulation is subjective. So that's where lots of people fall down, because you get some providers and they take, what's in the regulation one way, and then CQC actually mean it in another way. So it's subjective. So our our platform eliminates that for care providers, and it's doing the work for them, right? Do you know what I mean? I mean, we've got enough to do within social care, like making sure that people receive good care and supporting our staff and thinking of innovative ways in which we can push our services to be better for all that use it. Chasing references and working out employment gaps on a calculator with a paper form benefits no one. So we're hopeful that this can be sort of part of the reform that is needed within social care.
Absolutely. And some of that reform will be obviously focusing on retention. And how does ME Passport reduce some of that retention levels for care providers?
Well, it keeps them within the system. Because, right now, if I wanted a job in social care, I'd have to go out to 10 different providers, 10 different application forms. I'd have to do all of my checks all individually. No system talks to each other. And I just want a job, right? And the thing is, we keep talking about, people are leaving our sector for retail or whatever else. Or maybe it's quicker. Maybe it's a quicker place to get into. If I want a job tomorrow at Aldi, maybe it'll only take me 2 weeks to get in. And I know why we do the robust checks that we do, because we need them, because we look after vulnerable people. But we can't moan about retention and not think about a solution to keep people within our sector. And with ME Passport, because people are empowered with their own data and the ability to use it across providers, why would they leave? There's jobs. We've clearly got loads of vacancies. We're always talking about the recruitment crisis, so people are needed. So this is just empowering people to stay within the sector.
Just before we close, just a call to action. What is one tangible thing that a care provider listening, or even a care worker that might be listening, could go and do after this or tomorrow? What one thing would you recommend?
I'd say get in touch with Carly and Chloe and Katie at ME Passport and get a demo. I really would. Obviously I have a slightly partial view, but it is, for me, and having worked in identity and digital identity for over a decade, it's the best use case, not just for the Ryan parties, but also the people using it and the effect it has on those that need care. It just ticks every single box, and it's my favourite use case. That's probably a good place to close.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've just heard Jonathan's call to action. What would be one piece of advice that you would give either to a care worker that's listening or to a care provider that they could do tomorrow?
I think to a care provider, it's embrace digital. Don't be scared of it. Don't get stuck in the old archaic ways. I think that whether we like it or not, digital's coming towards us. That's it. It's the future. It's a conversation we have in every meeting we go to now. CQC are all around embracing digital technology. It's everything we hear from the government is about digital. And I get it, we've spoken to HR managers and they say, well, this software does my job. I'm going to lose a job from this. But you know what? I think it's evolution. You won't lose a job. It's like our ladies within Lodge Group Care, you get redeployed, you redeploy your resources to make your service better. Do you know what I mean? If we have more people within our service with more capacity to provide good services, well, how good would our services be? Because ultimately, what this all does is it benefits as well the end user. End users, I always say, I can push a pen great. I can do great policies. I can do all of this stuff. People don't really care about me. They care about their carers, and rightly so. And there's power in people. So what we are doing and what we all need to do is make it as easy as possible for people to, show capacity and be retained within the sector for those that need them. And I think with carers, it's like hop on board. Do you know what I mean? You want to work in social care and you want to utilise your skills. We need you. Hop on board. It's easier and it makes sense. Just do it. That's it.
I think great call to actions from both of you, and listening to you there, Carly, 100% back exactly what you say there, that care providers need to embrace that digital transformation that's happening here and now. It's not going anyway anytime soon. Where can people find out more?
Okay, so if you go to mepassport.co.uk and we have a register with me link. If you put your details in there, you'll get a call from one of our lovely team to provide you with a demo and help you hop on board.
Thank you very much, both of you, for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure.